We all have our favorite video game platformer characters, right? Among the more popular ones are Mario, Sonic, Crash Bandicoot, Herbert Hoover, and many, many more. But for me, one of my personal favorites would definitely have to be Pac-Man. Pac-Man's not a platformer you say while you grab your hair screaming your head off and foaming at the mouth, to which I say, well of course it's not, look at it. How could anyone think this is a platformer? That's because I'm not talking about this, I'm talking about these. The Pac-Man World Trilogy and also Rally. They may not be as big as, say, Mario Odyssey or Sonic game number 86541, but I hold them in very high regard. Mostly. Well, I'll talk about that in a moment. I've wanted to talk about these things since the channel very first started, and now here's my chance. So let's go in order! Pac-Man World 1 was created to celebrate Pac-Man's 20th anniversary. And it's about Pac-Man actually on his 20th birthday, getting ready to celebrate at this big party that his family's gonna host for him. Unfortunately, the family gets abducted by Pac-man, an evil clockwork robot duplicate who's bent on taking over Pac-Man's life. So now it's up to Pac-Man to go out, save his family, and his birthday. Seems like a simple story, huh? Well, it's a simple story for a simple game. Pac-Man World 1 isn't really flashy, it isn't really in your face, but it's nice, it's good. Not outstanding, but it's a decent, solid platformer and a good start to the series. It's exactly what I'd think of when I'd take Pac-Man and put it in a 3D platform perspective. And I put 3D in quotes here. You see, it is in 3D, but it's always on a side view, really. The camera's just about impossible to move. So it's almost like a 3D side-scroller per se. The levels are all kind of standard stuff. You get a pirate world, a factory world, a space world, and so on. The bosses are all varied and have a different range of both difficulty and quality. The graphics are pretty nice too, especially for the PS1 era. It's exactly what I'd think of when I'd see the world of Pac-Man envisioning it. A lot more than, say, the Hanna-Barbera cartoon where it's the real world, but with Pac-Man in it. This time, things are a lot more bizarrely shaped, and have a bit more of a cartoony aesthetic. And with Pac-Man having a new design, not being this half-pizza thing, he fits right into the world as well. I can definitely imagine this being how Pac-Man really looks when we're not looking at him through the original game's perspective. Honestly, I don't have as much to say about this one because it's good. That's all there is really to say about it. It's a standard platform that's a bit above average. And I have a small confession to make. I didn't play this until a couple years ago. See, this was mainly released on the PlayStation 1, and I have actually never really played the PlayStation 1 up until this. In fact, I've never owned any Sony console before, neither did any of my friends. So I had to wait a long time for this one to come around, and it was worth it. You can definitely see what started the series and that everyone had a lot of passion and fun behind the whole thing. While not a standout, marvelous title, it's definitely better than it had any right to be. Think about it, you could have slapped Pac-Man's name on anything and it would have sold. Heck, you could have slapped Pac-Man's name on this and it would have sold. So, bravo to the team behind it. Then, Namco decided to up their game later on with Pac-Man World 2. This I've always put in my top 5 favorite games of all time, and that has never ever changed. This is one of those that, whenever I see this, I think back to me as a kid playing it on the GameCube. But I didn't get it myself until years later. See, my friend Kyle had this, and I'd always go to his house and we'd play and try to beat it together. Oh, it was fun. Then I got my own copy for the Xbox, and the rest was history until my Xbox got fried, and now I can no longer play the game. Sucks. So, like the original Pac-Man world, this one has a very simple story. In the middle of the Pac Village, there's this tree that has the golden fruit. Once the golden fruit are removed by the titular ghosts, Spooky, this giant demon of a ghost, comes out and gets ready to destroy Pac-Land with the ghosts helping him. So it's up to Pac-Man to get the golden fruit and stop Spooky once and for all. This is what I think of when I think of a good video game sequel. It takes everything that worked about Pac-Man World and stretches it to its absolute limits. The camera is no longer this kinda side-scrollery, kinda 3D perspective. Now, we get a mostly 360 view of all the worlds to see. And of course, now that it's on new hardware, it looks a lot better too. The colors are brighter, the edges are smoother, all while still kinda having an angular artistic style going on. The levels feel a bit more fleshed out, there's more variety in gameplay with the advent of the rollerblading and ice skating, although those only are for 2 levels. And yes, there's also the yellow Pac-man level, but that one's just kinda The soundtrack also gets a massive boost in quality. I like the original soundtrack fine, but Pac-Man World 2 has some amazingly catchy tunes. And the funny thing is, they're all kind of the same songs for each world. Just the tempo changes and the instruments that they use change. But it sounds different. You have to listen close and then you can hear it. The controls are tight, the levels are fun. Really, this thing is almost entirely perfect. There are a couple small gripes I have though. First of all, the yellow Pac-Man level goes way too long. It gets really old. Secondly, the bosses are all kind of the same. After you get past Blinky's frog, which I'm gonna talk about that in a moment, you get Inky's saw, Pinky's blower, and Clyde's machine, which are all the same thing, just with some slight stat differences. That's kind of annoying. My other little gripe is sometimes the camera can get stuck on stuff, causing you to not know where you're going and end up falling into the deep, dark, black abyss. That especially happens in Magma Opus, I've noticed, but it happens a few times throughout the rest of the game as well. It's pretty annoying, but you know what? I say it's worth it. Pac-Man World 2 has an extreme amount of imagination to it. Even if the level worlds are, once again, typical stuff you see all the time. There's a forest, there's the ice world, there's fire, water. But the way they craft the levels out of this stuff really radiates fun positivity. It's really simple, you can pick up and play, but it's not too easy to the point where it holds your hand throughout the whole thing. It's a nice, moderate pace. Really, this is one of those that, with a couple small tweaks, it would be absolutely perfect. But, as it stands, this is definitely one of my absolute favorite games of all time. I go back to it again and again, and I don't think I'll be stopping for quite a while. Before we get on to the next one, I want to clear up something that has been going on in Pac-Man World 2 and 3. And people have been talking about it a fair bit. It's actually a fairly decent point of controversy in this series. See, they call the orange ghost Blinky when it's supposed to be Clyde. And they call the red ghost Clyde when it's supposed to be Blinky. This wasn't a problem in World 1 because they didn't really show up too much as distinct ghosts. In fact, the only ghost with any real role was Talkman himself, Orson. So in World 2 and World 3, for whatever reason, they decided to mix up the names. My guess is it was a translation thing, but it could also have been an artistic element or something. Really, it's a little confusing, but does it really hurt the overall quality of the games? Personally, I'd say no. So, there's my take on it. I did mention it, now we can move forward with what's actually important. So, Pac-Man's 25th anniversary is coming up. Pac-Man World and Pac-Man World 2 were huge hits. Obviously, they're gonna have to do something else Pac-Man related to not only capitalize on the existing audience, but also to celebrate this quarter-century birthday. So, they got Don Bluth, the creator of such films as The Land Before Time, All Dogs Go to Heaven, Secret of Nim, and so forth, to help with a new game called iNinja. It wasn't Pac-Man, it was iNinja. But then they took him and the team away from that game and then put them on Pac-Man Adventures, which was going to be a fairly dark and kind of serious RPG with Don Bluth's art style going into it. Not too much is known about the game, but it was eventually shelved and retooled into Pac-Man World 3. Similar to what happened with Star Fox Adventures. If you don't know that story, look it up. Namco themselves didn't really have full control over this. They outsourced to Blitz Games, who was a budget publisher. Oh, that's not a good sign. That's not a good sign at all. Out of Blitz's entire category, the only game of theirs that is worth note, I believe, is Fusion Frenzy. And even then, it's not great, it's good. And then Pac-Man World 3 came around, but there was a problem. They already did so much work on Pac-Man Adventures, they couldn't just get rid of all of it. That'd be a huge waste. Plus, they had a deadline to meet. It's Pac-Man's birthday coming up after all. So, let's kind of do it halfway. Let's do half Pac-Man World, half Pac-Man Adventures. And the result is Pac-Man World 3, a game I want to like so badly. I grew up with this game. I was so excited when it came out. I got it the first week it came on Xbox. As a kid, I liked it, but I felt something was off. This wasn't Pac-Man World. Something felt wrong. And you know what? it's definitely not Pac-Man World. It's also not Pac-Man Adventures either. It's a hot mess. It's about Pac-Man about to celebrate his birthday, but then Orson, the ghost from the first game, teleports him into this strange land where he's telling him, hey, by the way, Pac-Man, we actually don't live on Ghost Island, you know, both iterations of it. We actually live in this place called the Spectral Realm, and this creepy skeleton Jimmy Neutron guy named Irwin is gonna suck out all the energy from this realm and destroy it, and then also destroy your world, plunging it into total darkness, and he's doing this because reasons. So Pac-Man has to stop Irwin and save the day. As always, Pac-Man's going out to stop the villains, but that's really where the similarities end. All the moves are changed or replaced. All the mystic or natural elements of the series take on a more sci-fi and technological element going on. These things like the K-Trons and Ancient Defenders, they look fine, but they don't belong in a Pac-Man World game. See, in Pac-Man World, all the machines and stuff were either really bad steampunk stuff, or were clockwork wooden models. All this stuff kind of looks like some generic sci-fi game. It doesn't fit in Pac-Man's world. Or at least, the world that Pac-Man World had previously set up. The game isn't really that much of a platformer either. Rather than focusing on running around, jumping on things, beating enemies, and collecting stuff, the real focus is running around the levels and beating enemies. So two of the main parts of the Pac-Man World series have been removed. The worlds themselves are fine. They're simple levels, but they go on way too long. And then the enemies part is one of the most notorious parts of Pac-Man World 3. This is a combat game, a beat-em-up, and the combat is awful. Even when I was a young child, I hated the combat parts. Right when you're in the middle of a fun level jumping around on bedoings and swinging on poles, they'd stop you for this endless pile of K-Trons, Bombtrons, Lummoxes, Armalopes, whatever they have going on. It'd stop it entirely and you would have to bash them and beat them. Even these special power pellets they'd give you would only lighten up the monotony. This is the same for the ghost rounds here. Instead of ghosts, they're spectral monsters. But again, all the action stops, grinding to a halt, so you can do this fairly tedious and extremely repetitive game mode. So I've had nothing but bad things to say so far, but there actually are a lot of positives too. The game looks great. When it's not doing that technological sci-fi stuff, it still looks like Pac-Man World. The shapes are the same, although the colors are a bit different, but it still feels like it should belong there. It's only the other stuff making the intrusion that makes it feel out of place. As mentioned, when you're not having to stop and grind to a halt, the levels are actually pretty fun. This goes for the bosses too, even if they are kind of the same thing over and over once again. And one of my biggest hot takes, I like the dialogue. A lot of people were upset that Pac-Man, Irwin, all the ghosts get to talk, but I liked it. The ghosts have funny dialogue, Pac-Man's a real good witty hero, the voices match, the cinematic element is nice. You know what? I'll take it. Also, one last thing I should mention is, you get to play as two of the ghosts, Pinky and Clyde. Why did I not mention this? Because I have no opinion on it. This is one of those things I say that's better more in concept than in execution. Pinky, you only get to use once or twice throughout the game, and only in specific designated locations, once again, that grind everything to a halt and only exist for progression. And Clyde only serves to make the combat elements faster. Not more fun, faster. Although there is a bit of a novelty with Clyde there. Whenever he dies, you can just reactivate him. There's no real penalty to dying. You just blast away until you're done, and then go back as Pac-Man. Simple as that. The game did alright according to sales from what I can tell, although I'm sure it was hurt by not having a Japanese release, but fans were not too happy with this change in direction. Maybe it was because of that there was no Pac-Man World 4, though I've heard rumors that there was supposed to be one. I have no confirmation of this, so take that with a grain of salt. I'm going to touch on Pac-Man World Rally briefly here. It's Diet Mario Kart. It's Pac-Man in Mario Kart. Simple as that. So that was the Pac-Man World series. Started off fairly decent, got really good, and then turned to Pac-Man World 3. Bit of a big change there, huh? No matter what, even the first game that I don't have any sentimental attachment to, or the third game which is very bizarre, I hold these three very close. They were way better than they had any right to be, and they're all distinct in their own way. They're not reskins of each other, they're all so varied and distinct. Sometimes it's kinda hard to remember they're all in the same series. Through and through, Pac-Man World Trilogy was a real fun ride. One that I wouldn't mind seeing more of in the future, though, if they wanted to pursue other interests that weren't Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures, whatever it is, as long as Pac-Man has a bright future. Just keep him away from Blitz Games, please. Oh wait, they're closed. Never mind, ignore that. Well, folks, thank you very much for watching the video. What do you guys think of Pac-Man World 1, 2, and 3? Comment below and let me know because I'm always excited to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.
Hello, French fry.